I believe we are live, Nia.
Oh,
So
perfect,
yeah,
perfect.
we're live. We're getting our participants rolling in. They're starting to come in. So that's a good
Okay.
thing.
So
All
do we
right.
want to give them maybe a minute or two, or we're pretty
Yeah.
good?
Yeah,
Give
they're
them.
just starting to come in. Let them, you know.
Yeah, we can see everybody logging in, and then of course we'll find out if anybody's having technical issues. The
Okay.
good news, I guess maybe Nia, we learned that we have to let them know that they won't show up, so they don't have
Yeah,
to
that
worry if they didn't make up their hair or anything.
absolutely. I got that question early today, and I
Yeah.
answered that one for them. So
Yeah, I don't
yeah,
have to worry about their dogs or the babies crying in the background. So they could just, well, they'll be muted and, but they'll have an opportunity to ask questions too. So, but we'll show them how to do that.
That's perfect. I like
so we'll
that.
give maybe one more minute, and then we'll start.
Yeah, that works.
All right. There we go.
It's a great service that you're doing today, by the way. So
Why?
you like,
Thank you.
you gave
This
me a
is
great idea.
This is just one of a series of homeownership topics that we're going to have this year for all of our past, present, and future clients.
It's a great topic. I mean, I get a lot of questions from first time buyers and just trying to, navigate a new process for themselves,
Yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure.
Did
Okay,
you have RSVPs to this?
we had several
Oh, okay.
actually,
Cool. I was
and that's
just
why we're
curious if
just
there
giving
was.
them a few minutes to actually
Beautiful.
sign in here.
Get their cup of coffee,
Yeah, for sure.
get their notepad and piece of paper,
Yeah,
paper and notepad.
Got to take those notes.
That's
tell
right.
me about it. Okay, well, welcome everybody. My name is Onia Washington, and I am with OW Auction Group, and I have several team members that are here with me as well. I've been in the business 14 plus years, and this is a part of our Building Your Home Legacy series. This is actually one of a series of home ownership topics that we're going to have for our buyers. Just want to introduce who I have on the webinar with me. I actually have Rich Kimball, who's the regional VP for Cross Country Mortgage. He's been in the mortgage industry for 30 plus years. He is going to be answering any mortgage questions for you. We also have his executive assistant, which is Tony Giardini, on here with us. I'm thanking both of them for actually sponsoring, and Tony for being the moderator on this for us. And we have, of course, our guest, Ryan Schaefges, which is our property tax expert. And Ryan is going to be talking about property taxes, assessments, as well as the appeal process. Just a few housekeeping things here. Any questions that you have during this webinar, we're asking that you actually put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat, and that way I can raise my hand for Ryan and answer and ask those questions for you so that we can get those answered for you. The seminar should go for approximately 1 hour, I would say. First with Ryan giving us the presentation, and then we'll do Q&A afterwards. And of course, if there are some questions in between, we'll answer those as well. Okay. Ryan, well, actually, Rich, I'll turn it over to you really quick if you want to say a few words.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you very much for the invite. As a matter of fact, this is really inspiring for me, Tony. I'm sorry, Aunia. The reason that you inspire me is because Ryan and I have done this program for real estate agents to kind of add Ryan as kind of a tool for them to help them understand how this works so they can help their homeowners. And Nia kind of took it to the next level and said, well, we need to really just get this information to the homeowners. And really it inspired me that I need to do the same thing. So thank you seriously for that. It's really great. Just real quick on the mortgage front, obviously rates are amazing in the 2% range. And what we've been able to do for people over the last year is not only refinance them into a cheaper payment, cheaper rate, sometimes get rid of their mortgage insurance, lower their mortgage insurance. So if you haven't looked at that yet, and a lot of people surprisingly haven't, give us a ring. We'll add our contact information into the chat. And it's really, if you could save $100, $200, or $300 or more, it's certainly worth the inquiry. So our forecast is that rates will remain at these levels throughout the year, so that's good. And we're going to have a really strong housing market. But we're going to let Onia talk to you more about that. Thank you very much for having us. And again, we're here for mortgage-related questions. So, and Tony has added my contact information in. I'm also going to have her put Ryan's contact information as well. So, thanks, Onia.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, Ryan, we're gonna let you take.
And in the immortal words, there you go. You're muted.
Oh yeah,
now
no,
you're not muted.
I was waiting for my cue in case, my keyboard gets a little loud sometimes. So, all right, let's just throw I think that should be the presentation. I believe that should allow everyone.
Looks good, Ryan, on this end.
All right. Well, my name is Ryan Schaefges. I am an attorney. I have been focusing on property taxes since I became an attorney, basically, and while I was in law school. It's been going on 8 years now. And I'm here to kind of go through the basics of property taxes, understanding them, and how to possibly save on them through appeals. My practice focuses on tax appeals throughout all of Illinois. I've worked in Cook County and about a dozen other counties in Illinois, and I'm happy to talk property taxes anywhere in the state. The first thing I always like to do in a presentation is the basics of property taxes. The most basic part is in Illinois, we pay property taxes in arrears. So this year, we're going to pay our 2020 assessment, which is determined and finalized at some point. Some counties just finalized right now. Some still haven't finalized. Cook County isn't even close to finalizing, but they finalize the 2020 assessments after all the appeals are done. And then we get our bills this year. In Cook County, your first installment bill is not a calculation of anything to do with your actual tax liability. Because of the time it takes Cook County to get things sorted, they keep their revenue stream going by always charging 55% of last year's bill as the first installment, as an estimate, and then they do the full calculation of the tax bill in the second installment. And that's where they apply exemptions and they see how much you paid in the first installment, and that's how they come to their math. And so what that means is right now in Cook County, if you own a property, you can actually see your bill. It's out there because it's a simple calculation of last year's bill. They don't send them till February and they're not due till March 2nd this year, but they are out there online available because again, it's just a simple calculation. Every other county in Illinois pays their property taxes in 2 equal installments. They come out in May typically and due June, September. And that's how basically every other county in the state does it. And that's the most basics of the property taxes. The next is to understand the 4 parts that make up your tax bill. Those parts are the assessed value, and that's kind of the basis of your tax bill. The equalization factor, which we won't really get into, but that's a number set by the county that's basically statutorily required. In most counties outside of Cook, it's give or take 1. Sometimes it's 0.98, sometimes it's 1.02 or something like that, but it's a very small factor that slightly increases it. In Cook County, it's usually around 3. And that number this year, if you look at the slide, in 2019, that's the most recent number we have. We don't have 2020s yet. It was 2.916. And that is a number that we can't really control or do anything about, and it's a county-wide number. So when we talk about taxes, the number that we focus on is the assessed value because that's the number we can change. The next is the tax rate, and that tax rate is determined by mostly the school district, your county, your park district, all those other things that your taxes pay for, but the school district's the largest part. And again, that's set by them. You can appeal that. Typically, it's done in a class action way, not really something that you would ever get really involved with. And it is something that you can't really do much about. And even when there are minor changes, they're typically very, very tiny. So the equalization factor and the tax rate, there's not a lot we can do there. Assessed value and exemptions are where we focus, because the exemptions are what you're entitled to on your as a homeowner. If you live at a property that you own, you're entitled to a homestead exemption. And this example I have up, they got a $1,000 homestead exemption because they lived there. Senior exemptions also apply, and we'll talk about the qualifications and stuff for that. But this is also where the freeze and any other exemptions that may be applicable would show up. Those all get calculated. So those are the 4 basic parts of the tax bill. And as they had mentioned, if there are questions, type them in chat and someone will give me a little nudge and I'll try to answer them as best I can. Of course, at the end, I will also be open for questions as well. Now I'm going to go into those parts that we can actually work on, the assessed value and the exemptions. The assessed value is the basis of the tax bill. It's the first number that gets multiplied by the rest. And then the exemptions get subtracted out at the end. But that is tied to the market value of the house. In Cook County, that assessed value of a residential property is 10% of its current market value. That's the way the statutes are written, and that's the way it's supposed to be. Sometimes it isn't. We correct them. But if you're doing quick math and you're looking at your property, the assessment, the market value, those are comparisons. It's supposed to be 10%. So in all other counties, it's 33 1/3, so 1/3 per percentage. So it's take it and divide it by 3. This is the value and the number that we should appeal, and that's what I constantly am appealing.
Hey Ryan, I just want to interject. So real quick on the Cook County side, if you as a homeowner are looking at the assessed value and it says the assessed value is $10,000.
Let me just pop to this next slide.
Oh, perfect. Good. Oh, look at that. All right, perfect. That's my segue. Sorry about that.
No, I got you. That's why this slide's here. So when you're looking as a homeowner, as at the assessment, and you see if you get a bill and it says your assessment is $30,000. In Cook County, it's really easy. That you just add a 0 because it's 10%, and that's what their market value is. It goes the other way too. If you bought a house for $300,000 and you're looking at the assessment, if it's over 30,000, there's something a little wrong. If it's a lot under, that's a different story. But that's kind of the correspondence. 30,000 assessed value is 300,000 market value, and 10,000 assessed value is 100,000. That's how it goes. This is for residential again because they're assessed at 10%. All other counties, all properties assessed at 33 1/3%. So a market value of $300,000 corresponds to about 100,000 assessed value. And that's 500,000 assessed value is a $1.5 million property. That's how that works. And it's divide by 3 or divide by 10 or multiply by 3 or 10 to go back and forth between the two. And that's a good way to check when you're recently purchased a property or you're looking at a property. It's a great thing to do to just compare the purchase price or the offer that you're making to the assessed value. You can look up the assessed value on your local assessor's website. Go to Cook County Assessor, DuPage, Lake, Will, whatever county you're in, they all have an assessor's website. Most of them publish the assessments, and you can just do a quick comparison to see where you stand. And it can be, your purchase price can be a strong case. It's not the end of anything, but it can be a strong case to use to appeal the taxes. If in Cook County especially, there is a purchase price that is above the current assessment, you can still appeal it on a different grounds. You would not appeal it through the market because the market would not be a strong case as you just purchased it for higher than it's assessed. The next number, the breakdown, is that tax rate. And I just real quick like to go through and, if you ever look at your bill, most of your taxes typically anywhere from 50 to 75% go straight to your school. The rest go to the city, the county, the village, township, libraries, parks, water, all those sorts of things. But the bulk of it is directly to your school. That's how we fund our schools in Illinois, and that's what the tax rate mostly is made of. So the exemptions are the next most important part. There's a lot of exemptions out there, and it's very important to know what's on your tax bill for while you own it, or for a property that you're looking to buy, because the taxes may be different than what you would experience as the owner. If you're buying a property that, let's say, has a senior freeze on it, those taxes would change drastically when you took ownership. So it's important to know what you're getting into and to know what you have, because sometimes you can work to correct those things. The calculation wise in Cook County and others, these exemptions come off after. So they calculate the assessed value, tax rate, and then they just subtract out the exemptions because they are static numbers typically. And so they just come off at the end. The application for exemptions is available online. It's typically in the first part of the year. This year for Cook, I believe one of my slides will address that, but it's February. That's what they say. And in Cook County, for your homestead, your senior, and your senior freeze, for most exemptions, you're actually able to go backwards by 1, 2, 3 years, occasionally 4 years, to correct the missing exemptions. And that's only available in Cook County, but other counties, you can at least realize that if you're missing something, and then you can get that corrected. So going forward, you get the benefit of your exemption. Now, the types of exemptions that are available, most common is the homeowner's exemption, and the requirements behind that are simply to own your house and live in your house. Now, the exemptions, and this ties back to, since we pay taxes in arrears, the exemptions are based on who lived in the property on January 1st of the year in question for the taxes. So this year, when people are paying their property taxes in July, where the exemptions are calculated, that exemption is based on who lived there January 1st, 2020. So if you bought a property in March of 2020, and it was vacant and didn't have a homestead exemption, and then this year you apply for the homestead exemption, it most likely will not show up on your tax bill this year, because January 1st, there was no one living there, and you certainly weren't living there, so you're not eligible for the exemption. And so you can apply for it, and then it'll get marked on there with your ownership date, and then it'll apply to the following year. So if you bought at any point in 2020 from a property that did not have a homestead exemption, you are not eligible to receive your homestead exemption until, it won't show up on your bill at least until July of 2022. And that's kind of how much of a lag there is. And then the senior exemption is if you are living in a property that you own and you're over the age of 65, there's an additional exemption that you are granted. And again, it's based on if you have the homestead exemption already, then if you turn 65 in that calendar year, it's applicable to the next year's bill. So instead of being January 1st, it's if you turned 65 in 2020, you're eligible for the senior exemption on your 2021 tax bill. The senior freeze is it's the same eligibility as the homestead and senior. You have to live there. You have to own the property, live there, be responsible for the taxes, be over the age of 65. And then the senior freeze is offered to those households with an annual household income below $65,000. And so that's another exemption that can apply. That one you have to apply for every year, as your income can change, sometimes drastically. And so they always make you reapply for that and restate your income every year for the senior freeze. Disability is also an exemption. If you have a disability, you can apply. It's a small exemption, but it can be anywhere from $100 to $300-$400 depending on where your local tax rate. But if you have a disability and you can submit for that exemption, they have certain requirements and paperwork that they're required to show, but that is also there, and that has to be renewed every year because sometimes you can be temporarily disabled. But again, you just keep on renewing that as long as it's applicable. The last not the last, but the next exemption that is most common is the veterans exemption. There's two different veterans exemptions. There's a returning veterans exemption. If you've recently left service, you have the ability to get a returning veterans exemption. The largest exemption that there is the disabled veterans exemption. And that is applicable to any veteran that has a service-related disability. And if the amount of that exemption is based on the disability level, over 75% disabled, I believe, or I forget the exact cutoff on the disability, but there's tiers, and I believe it goes under 50%. There is either a small or no benefit, and then 50 to 75%, there's a slightly larger benefit, and then above 75%, there is a total benefit where the property taxes are just no longer, they don't charge you taxes anymore up to a certain home value of about $750,000, $800,000 home value. They just won't charge taxes on it. It's a very large exemption.
Ryan, I have a couple questions
Sure.
for you here. Can you have exemptions on more than one home?
You cannot. So if you own multiple properties, you are only entitled to one exemption. Now, if let's say you own let's say you own two properties, but your parents live in one, technically they're eligible for the exemption on that one as long as they're the ones responsible for the taxes, which means as long as they're on the deed, because then they're legally responsible for the taxes. Or sometimes you can arrange to have it. There's ways to make it so if it's, let's say, a family member who's actually living there, or someone who's on the deed in addition to you, then you can have multiple exemptions on multiple properties, yes. But it is something you have to be very careful about, because let's say you just own 4 investment properties, small little houses or townhomes. If you have exemptions on multiple properties and you're not entitled to them, the assessor tries to notice that, and if they do notice it, they will send you letters, and they're called erroneous exemption notices, and they will try to collect on that, and they typically will go back anywhere from 3 to 8 years, depending on the situation and how many properties there are. And they also charge fines, fees, and penalties. So it's always great to check your exemptions so you know exactly what you're getting and make sure you're entitled to what you're getting, or at least you know what's going on.
Okay, and then there's a question that says, is that based on state or county?
The exemptions are based on the county. They actually are different values, but
So I think they're asking if you own a home in Florida.
Oh, they will absolutely.
Here.
You get one homestead exemption no matter what. One of the biggest things that happens is people who own homes in Florida and have a homestead exemption there as well. They flag that constantly. You cannot have exemptions in multiple states or multiple counties unless, again, the specific scenario I said, where you are allowed to, like your family members on the deed, and they're the ones entitled to the exemption. But if you, and Florida is the state most commonly flagged. They, I think, do regular searches for deeds in Florida to see if there's any names that match, and they flag those.
Okay, here's another question for you. Someone was asking if you said that the taxes are calculated at 33rd and a third of the market value.
Yes.
Okay, and because they're curious because they're in Will County, so they wanted to make sure they had a good understanding.
So in Will County, if you have a property that's valued at $300,000, the assessment should be $100,000. That's Will County is 33 1/3%.
Okay, here's another question for you. I think you're probably going to answer it later on, but they'd like for you to clarify the difference between appealing at the assessor's office and the board of review, and should they appeal at both offices? So I think you're going to touch upon that later, or?
Absolutely, the levels of appeal.
Okay, and then one other one, I'm getting them both through the chat and my
no worries
my phone text messages. Just in terms of if you purchased a home in 2020, a veteran owned it and they had zero taxes last year, how does that impact somebody this year as a new homeowner and they're not in that status? So they're going to be
They will get
regular
taxed
homeowner.
fully based on whatever the assessment is. I actually have a
Okay.
client right now who purchased a property, and I believe they purchased it from a disabled veteran. There was no tax bill at all. And when they purchased it, the first year, they purchased it in October, they got a $2,000 tax bill for just those 2.5 months for November, December, and part of October. The next year they got that. And then this year we appealed it, and this was a property that had zero tax bill, but based on the full assessment, according to the county, the tax bill would have been about $15,000. And so that's just whatever it's fully assessed at. So it went from $0 to 15,000 in 1 year. We appealed that down and saved them a lot, but it's based on whatever the assessment is, because even though there's an exemption kind of deleting all the bill, there's still an assessed value for the property. And so if you do notice that there's no tax bill for a property because it's got a disabled veterans exemption, you can look at the assessed value and calculate what it would be if not for that exemption, or you can ask me and I'll do that for you, or someone else. That's I get that question a lot. I'm putting an offer on a place. I don't know what the taxes are going to be because they have a senior freeze. They've been there for 20 years and they're 90 years old and their taxes are $2,000, but the house is $600,000. And what are the taxes going to be? And then I kind of put some estimates out for people to give them an idea of what it will be when that exemption falls off. Rich,
Okay.
did you have something?
I did have a quick question. So on the senior exemption, so I own a primary residence here in Illinois, and then I have a second home in Florida. Am I entitled to a senior exemption on my second home in Florida?
You are entitled to exemptions only on the properties. You're entitled to exemptions on one property.
Got it.
So you can have your homeowners and your senior on one property, either here or in Florida. If you do have both, there's a good chance that they will flag that, and they will either remove it in your Illinois property, or they will remove it and send you some back bills to pay it back.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and so that's that. The next thing, it's very important to know what exemptions are on a bill. Whether you own the property, know what you're getting, if you're getting all that you're entitled to, or if you're looking to buy a property, know what's on that before you buy it so you can understand where the taxes are going to be when you take ownership. But it's very easy to find out. Your assessor and your treasurer both have various ways to view it. And most counties have an online portal. There's links right here for Cook County, Lake County, DuPage County, McHenry County, Will County. But those links can be very easily found if you just simply search DuPage County Assessor or property lookup. Any of those things should be able to get you where you want to. I included these links because these are the ones that get you to the clearest sites, and they're pretty simple to see what your assessment is. Some of them even show you a quick history, and they'll show you what your exemptions are. But again, it's very important to know what exemptions are on your bill or the possible bill that you're buying. The last bit about exemptions is the state passed legislation that said that homestead exemptions and senior exemptions can renew automatically. Like Cook County has pushed that into effect, and so they will now automatically renew those. But if they're not on there, they don't really automatically renew. In Cook County, they've announced that early February, they plan to put the online application out for all homestead exemptions and senior exemptions, senior free. All that's going to be an online option. You can still do paper, but it's very easy. You go online. They have built-in DocuSign, I believe. You can click through. You upload a picture of your driver's license. You're going to digitally sign an application and an affidavit, and you can take care of all that yourself and make sure you get your application, your homestead application in, so that your property exemption applies in later this year in July. Every other county, check the status. And this really just comes down to a matter of size. Every other county combined has a population of Cook County. So it's really just difficult for Cook County to do things. That's why they try to make it simpler with this online. But most other counties, you can see if you're getting the exemption, and if you're not, you typically just call them or fill out the form that they have online and get it applied for the next bill. Every other county in Illinois typically does not go backwards. Most often, best case scenario is if you see your bill that comes out in May, and I always advise you check them in any county outside of Cook, get that first installment bill, see if your exemption is on there. If it's not, they will issue a certificate of error for that year if you provide them with, proof that you live there and own it, and they will reduce your second installment bill to apply that exemption properly that year. So it's always good to check it. The bill will have the exemptions on it. Review that, look at it, and if you're not, you can simply call them and correct it. Most counties are more than happy to fix that, and they're typically very good about it. Cook County, if you fill out the online form, you will get your exemption. I don't know any, they just started this last year, and I don't know anyone last year who filled it out who was unable to get their exemption, who didn't get their exemption. So it works very well. They've got this new system, and I highly recommend it. For my clients who I appeal their taxes, I will be sending them these links in February to tell them to go and remind them to fill out their homestead exemption and their senior exemption forms. Again, it's a great online process, very simple.
I have a question
Absolutely.
here. And this one actually goes to Rich.
Okay.
In terms of a first-time home buyer, when they are filling out all of their documents at closing, are they filling out anything as it relates to homeowners exemptions within that mortgage package or anything like that?
That's a really, that's a great question, but it's actually probably better for an attorney. There's nothing in our mortgage documentation that goes back to the county that basically tells the county what their status is and what exemptions they qualify for. Now, I'm going to defer to Ryan, because usually there's an attorney there representing the buyer, and that attorney gives the following advice. Go ahead, Ryan.
When you buy a property and if you're buying it to own and occupy, you should talk to your assessor and fill out your homestead application. But yeah, nothing you fill out at the closing is going to go to the county, except for a form that they'll note and they'll collect their taxes on. Otherwise, you just have to, again, basically do what I just said. Each county has different application processes. Most counties, they see a deed for a single family home, go to another single, one or two people. They typically just auto renew those exemptions. But yeah, the exemptions there's nothing in the paperwork with the closing that goes to the county for exemptions. It's always on top of, in addition to.
Yeah, and what I was getting at with regards to the segue to Ryan is that what I've seen real estate attorneys do in the closings is that they'll tell their client, look, it is your responsibility to go to the county and let the county know that you qualify for these exemptions. And it's very important, which leads me to another question. And I don't know if you were going to cover it in the slides, Ryan, but what is in Cook County, it's the biggest county here, what is the average homeowner's exemption worth as far as a tax bill? And what's the average senior exemption worth?
So that is an interesting question, and I'll answer it like this. It depends on your tax rate. In Cook County, the tax rates vary from 5% to 35%. Most often, the taxes will be 10, 15%. That's the rate. And in that case, the exemption is $1,000 to $1,500. It's actually a 10,000 equalized assessed value. So you just take your tax rate and move the percentage over a couple of points. So if you have a 10% tax rate, it's $1,000. If there's a 5% tax rate, it's a $500 exemption. And if it's a higher tax rate, it's a higher exemption. For the senior, so homestead is 10,000 equalized assessed value. Senior is 8,000 equalized assessed value. So if your homestead exemption is 1,000, your senior exemption is 800. And that's pretty much it. That applies for Cook County. All the other counties, it is equalized assessed value. It's 6,000 for the homestead and 5,000 for the senior. So if your tax rate is 10%, it's 600 and 500. That's how that works in the other counties.
So no matter what, it's worth making sure you've got all your exemptions, because it could
It
be
is
getting...
always worth it. And especially in Cook County, if you've lived in a house, I have many clients all the time who've lived in a house and never gotten it. If you've lived there for more than 4 or 5 years and we can go backwards, we can get you checks from the county for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars.
It looks like the question came in, how soon is too soon to apply for that?
For the exemptions?
Uh-huh.
So exemptions are based on your ownership, and they apply if you've lived there as of January 1st. So you can always apply, and most counties will track and keep it for you. But if, like I said, in this year, when this comes out, if you bought your property last year, you're technically not eligible for the exemption until the following year. And so most counties, though, will just assume that the prior seller was living there, and they'll still continue on that exemption, because that's what often is the case. The seller was there on January 1st that year, so the seller gets that exemption, which you are the one who receives the benefit for, and then you will carry on your exemption. But you can always apply. No county is going to say, the worst a county is going to do is say, okay, we've got it on record, and your exemption will take place whenever it is appropriate.
So I think that's key. That
there's
even if they get in there, they'll potentially track it for them.
Yeah, and it's never going to hurt to apply too early. You just apply that year and then the next year. And now the next slide is a bit of a diversion from the exemptions here. We're going to talk about the assessment cycle. This is important because in Illinois, your property gets reassessed on a cycle once every 3 or 4 years, depending on where it is. And it doesn't matter, if you buy or sell, they don't look at the individual sale, unless you point it out to them. But in Cook County, it's every year, one group of property is getting reassessed. So this year, the south and southwest suburbs of Cook County are being reassessed. Sorry, that was in 2020. Those all got reassessed. It's still wrapping up, which is why I said it the way. But in 2021, the city of Chicago proper is getting reassessed. And then next year, the pink area on that map will get reassessed again, the north and northwest suburbs. It just rotates on a 3-year cycle, north and northwest, south and southwest, city of Chicago. Every other county is on a 4-year cycle that all just got reassessed in 2019 and will get reassessed again in 2023. The reason that makes a difference is because if you buy a property in the city of Chicago this year, when you appeal it based on that purchase price or something else, it will last for 3 years until it gets reassessed again. And if you appeal a property in the north and northwest suburbs in 2021, it'll only last for 1 year, because in 2022, the assessor will apply their formula to your property again and not necessarily take into consideration any appeals you may have done in the past. The next slide is the question people ask is why, and this is the reality. Cook County has 1.8-ish million parcels of land. 1.3 million of those are residential, give or take. These are ish numbers. There's constantly properties going up and down, but the assessor does their best to value all the properties, but the assessor has a team of people. There are 1.8 million parcels, and they're doing several 100,000 each year. So they do their best, and they apply mass appraisals and statistics and data to all the properties, and it does a pretty good job, but they make mistakes, and sometimes the facts are wrong for the property. Sometimes they just make mistakes and they overvalue things because they don't have the ability to look at individual circumstances of your property or even your specific little neighborhood, which may have something unique going on. A road expanded, a big building went up and changed things, traffic patterns got messed with. That can affect value as well as, the assessment. And so an appeal ensures that you're paying your fair share, and it doesn't really do anything else. At least in Cook County, they will almost never raise your assessment in response to an appeal. In the collar counties, they might. So be careful. It's something to watch out for. It's rare, but it could happen. And so the the reason why is you're not really saying anyone's doing anything wrong. You're just kind of making sure that they are able to evaluate the specific circumstances of your exact property. For homeowners, you can begin appealing immediately. Even a recent purchase, you bought it, 2 days later, if the township is open for appeals, you can appeal. There are even some areas in the state, most areas in the state, where you can appeal if you're under contract. If you're going to be the one who's paying those taxes next year, you have the right to appeal them. You are just ensuring you pay your fair share, and it allows you to have someone look at the taxes, make sure that your exemptions are in place, make sure the facts are correct, the age, the square footage of the house, because the assessor, again, they're relying on the data they have. None of that's perfect. They can and do make mistakes, and it's always good to just take a look at everything. When I sign up clients, I always verify what they think the square footage is. And, you know, if a client says the square footage is 2,000 and the assessor has 2,100 square feet, that's close enough. But I had a client who was listing a property for sale, and their realtor came at me and said, here's the square footage. And then the assessor had a very different square footage, and the realtor assumed that they were just including the below grade square footage, the finished basement. The assessor never includes the finished basement in their square footage of the building. And so this house had 2,000 square feet that was just completely incorrectly being assessed as above ground square footage, and therefore their assessment was off and they were paying way too many taxes. Unfortunately, that had been going for 18 years since the house was built, and we were able to clear it up and go get some money back, but not quite as far back as we want. So it's a good idea to review your taxes, to know what you're paying, what the assessor is charging you for, and make sure everything is correct.
I have a couple questions here for you in the chat box. One attendee says, I've heard that if we do appeal and indeed you are paying less, then it will bring attention to your property tax and they may raise your taxes. Is that not true?
So in Cook County, I have never seen them raise an assessment in response to an appeal. I've just never seen that ever. I've been doing this in Cook County 8 years. I've never seen them raise it. And here's the reality. People think that, but your property, again, 1.8 million parcels, your single family home that's worth a couple $100,000 doesn't really register. They're not going to try to hold a grudge or a vendetta. They will, even in Cook County, let's say, you know, you're here and your place, you're arguing that it's worth here, but in reality, it's probably worth here and everyone else is up here, but there's a couple people down here and you're trying to get down with them. They're just going to deny you the appeal. They're not going to raise it. They're not going to do anything. If you tell them your house is smaller than they think, and they come out and measure it and it turns out it's bigger, then they maybe increase the square footage. But in Cook County, they will almost never, I've literally never seen it. I've never seen an increase in response to an appeal. In the collar counties, if there is a recent purchase price, by recent, I mean within that year, then sometimes the assessor will take that and increase if you try to appeal, they'll increase to that purchase price. But I have never seen any draw attention to. I know, so I always ask my clients, and I know some of them may not tell me the full truth, but I know I've had at least a client who I have a feeling put a second floor on a building, and because he would laugh when I showed him the appeal and the pictures, then he said, is that what they think it looks like? And well, you know, I mean, it's we still appeal it, we save money, but we appeal based on the facts they have, and I always try to get the facts out. But again, I've never seen the assessor ever do anything like vindictive. As they try to encourage people to appeal, because for them it helps. They get better facts, they get better information, and if they started increasing people's assessments in response to appeals, it would discourage a lot of people from appealing, and I don't think they want that. So
okay, just a couple other quick questions, and I think you answered this one. Is it possible for a review to cause an increase in your taxes?
So I've never seen it in Cook County. In the collar counties, absolutely. And again, it's almost the only time I've ever seen it in the collar counties is if the property is assessed at $300,000. You just bought it for $350,000, and then you're appealing it, trying to get it down to 250. I have seen them say, well, I've never had my clients, I know they've increased other people. I've actually had an assessor when I had a client contact me last minute and I didn't, and I submitted the appeal and I said, okay, I'll do it. I didn't get a chance to fully review that client's property. They had just bought it. It hadn't shown up on the recorder sites yet, so I couldn't even see that. And the assessor reached out to me and said, your client just purchased this property for X and you're asking for this. Do you maybe want to reconsider this because we're going to ask for the increase? And then I just withdrew the appeal. But yeah, that it's you should always be honest with your attorney, and you should always, don't in the that's collar counties only, or outside of Cook County. Okay.
Another one is, what other counties do you work in outside of Cook County?
So currently I have clients in Lake, Kane, McHenry, DuPage, Will, Kendall, Winnebago. I have a couple clients in smaller township. Like I'll work anywhere in the state of Illinois personally. And that's just it. I'll work anywhere. Everywhere has a process set up for appeals. So you can review anywhere, and I will currently, I think I have clients in 12 counties.
Okay. Another question, in terms of, they said it was a great point to verify square footage that the county's using. Where can they get their correct square footage? Would that
that's the
would
question.
Be an appraisal, or
so there's a couple different. Sometimes appraisers just use the available data.
okay.
Here's what I'll say. I have had corrections that the assessor made from 3 different sources. One, blueprints, original blueprints, schematic, stuff that they found that showed square footage. That was one. We used that. The assessor went out and remeasured. We got a reduction. We used that as our evidence. The second one was an insurance agent. They were reviewing this property, and the insurance, because they wanted to make sure, okay, you have a 4,000 square foot house. We want to make sure, we're insuring the correct. They go out and measure, and it is significantly smaller than what they thought. So they actually lowered their insurance. And then the insurance agent brought them to me, and then we used that sketch that the measurements that the insurance agents took, we used those measurements. The final one is sometimes when they buy or sell, the realtor will put a square footage that they got from, if they do the 3D scans or tours, sometimes they get square footage that way. They'll do rough measurements, and they'll have that. That's typically the sources we get the square footage from. I will say this, we can provide a source. The assessor most of the time just comes out and remeasures themselves. And I say that because if you're, I know like the 3D tours things will take rough measurements and they'll estimate, but they're estimating wall to wall. Inside, the measurements the assessor cares about are actually the exterior in. So they have a little bit more because you consider your walls are 6 or 8 inches thick or whatever, and you apply that to the entire house, and suddenly you're at, 100 or 200 square feet. And that's why we say it has to be probably outside of 10%. So if you have a 3,000 square foot house and the assessor says it's 3,200 square feet, maybe we run with it. If you have a 3,000 square foot house and the assessor says she has a 5,000 square foot house, that's what literally this example on the screen is. This is the result of an assessor who said it was over 5,000 square feet. In reality, it was 3,700 square feet. And we got the reduction from a $900,000 valuation down to a $650,000 valuation. And that was based on a square footage submitted by the realtor in this case. The assessor went out and remeasured themselves, but that was what was the catalyst for that. And that example leads right into this example here. And this is literally an example where there was a square footage error and we appealed it and we corrected the square footage error. We are even trying to appeal it further down based on the new square footage now. But just as an example, this assessment was at 89,569. We got it down to 65,003. And this is their estimated savings on that property. This was a senior, so I kind of calculated without the exemptions appropriate. And this appeal saved them almost $7,000. We are also, because this was a square footage error, going backwards, and the timing worked out. So we're actually going back for 4 years on this one, and we're hoping to get them. Now, I don't know about 6,000 or 7,000 each year, but we're hoping to get them a substantial amount each year back. And that is, again, this was a result of a realtor noticing the discrepancy, bringing data to me, bringing the client to me, and that client, my hope is to get them $15,000 back in refunds from that mistake. This is kind of the why. You can literally realize huge savings. The when, that, and these are, I don't even know if you can see them, but these are township deadlines for Cook County on the left. The middle is DuPage County. The right is Will County. And those are just to show you that the deadlines vary by township within a county. And so if you, the numbers on the Cook County one are literally starting from, there's dates that were in May. Obviously, COVID messed up with a lot of this stuff for the early parts until they got their system set, but there were a lot of May, June, July, and then that was the assessor deadlines. And there's the board. We're going to talk about the levels in just a second here. But yeah, then there's the board deadlines, which there's some of them that are still open now in Cook County. DuPage wrapped up, I think, in December, but they were open from September to December. Will County is a one-shot. The whole county opens up for appeals. This year it was August through September 14th. That was the whole county, one deadline for everything, but it depends on which township you're in, which county you're in, and that's when your deadline is. And that's why I always tell people, sign up, either do it yourself and start looking for, have you at whatever web page is relevant to you, put that as a favorite, check it every once in a while, because you don't get a notice of these deadlines. You have to find out for yourself, or hire someone like me. I will monitor deadlines for all my clients. They never have to worry about that. But that is, it's an important thing to note, because you have a 30-day window to appeal. In Cook County, you get a second shot. There's a formal level at the assessor and a formal level at the Board of Review. Every other county has informal appeals with the assessors, and they're very interesting and unique, but they also have formal 30-day windows with the Board of Review. The next thing is going to address the levels.
One quick question for you.
Go ahead.
As a rule, do home improvement permits for your home filed with the city cause tax increases?
So as a rule, would say yes. So when you add square footage, if you pull a permit to remodel a kitchen, that's not doing anything. You pull a permit to remodel, updating and upkeep of a property isn't going to impact your valuation, because that's normal. It's expected upkeep. That'll never impact you. Pulling for floors or bathroom, whatever, roof, siding, those are all just every 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. It's expected. That never increasing value. They expect that you'll be doing those things to upkeep your property, which is, they're basing it kind of everyone having, the same type of property in those neighborhoods. The things that will cause an increase and a change is when you pull a property to add square footage, or pull a permit to add square footage, or pull a permit to add a second level. When you change the house fundamentally, even finishing a basement, so the basement, when you finish, you change from unfinished to finished, that will alert them and they'll change that. Most counties try not to put too much emphasis on the assessment difference between finished and unfinished. What they usually do is just try to compare it to other finished basements. The reason being, they don't want to discourage people from pulling permits, because that people just get discouraged and just say, oh, I don't want to get my taxes increased. The basements is the biggest one. I will say this: when you pull a permit and change the square footage of your house, you get what's called a home improvement exemption. They will note the change, they'll increase your assessment, and they give you up to a certain chunk of the assessment they don't bill you for 4 years. So that's called the home improvement exemption. It's typically automatically applied when you pull the permit. So that way they note the change and you can see that, but then there's an exemption on your tax bill, which would then kind of compensate for that for about 4 years. And if you have specific questions, the home improvement exemption is very unique because it's not something you apply for. It's automatically applied in those cases of home improvements. The next point here is to answer that question from way back when about the multiple levels. In Cook County, you can appeal at the assessor In a formal appeal process, there's a 30-day appeal window. You can appeal, you'll get a decision, and then you can also appeal to the board. I always recommend, if people are appealing on their own, they can appeal at the assessor, that's fine. But the assessor is the one who is kind of creating their data, justifying their data. And the board of review is the impartial third party between you and the assessor. And they're a very good go-between. And so I always, unless you get a good reduction that you're happy with at the assessor, let's say you bought a property for 100,000 and the assessor reduced it to purchase price, maybe there isn't an argument for at the board of review. But you can argue at the board of review, and I always recommend that. And I absolutely recommend appealing there, just because there's, again, review your property, see if there's a case, submit the case as applicable. Every other county, they have informal assessor appeals. Those are very hit and miss because the publications for the data, for the assessments that you're supposedly fighting, are not published yet. And so it's risky, because especially if you don't know what the assessment's going to be and you're telling them to lower it, you don't know if you're, or to change it, you don't know if you're telling them to lower it or raise it. And so it can be an interesting proposition. But appeal at the board of review with your 30-day window. You'll get a formal decision. And then it's important to note, even if you get an unsuccessful decision at the board of review, that's not the end. It doesn't have to be the end. And you can and should, especially if there's a good case, appeal it to the Property Tax Appeal Board. You can only appeal there if you got a decision from the board of review. You take that decision, you have a 30-day window, and you appeal it to the Property Tax Appeal Board. Those appeals, so at the board of review, you'll get a decision within, at Cook County, typically 2 to 4 months. In all the collar counties, like DuPage County takes appeals last year. They still haven't issued the decisions. Typically, they come out in March. Lake County had appeals that were all in August and September this year. They issued their decisions about a week ago in Lake County. And so those are, that's when you get a trigger to appeal at the Property Tax Appeal Board. Decisions vary, but when you get that, the timing of the decisions vary, but when you get your decision, then you have a 30-day window to appeal it to the Property Tax Appeal Board of Illinois. And decisions there are typically issued in 2 to 4 years. And so it's a long time, but what can happen is you pay your taxes, you fight it at the state, and then if you're successful, you get a refund check in the end. That is, I believe, the end of my presentation. I have some helpful sites up here. These are cookcountypropertyinfo.com is a very useful site. It kind of has a breakdown of tax rates, your assessment history, your tax history, your evaluations. It shows you how many exemptions are on the property, what your tax bill is going to be. It's a very helpful site. The DuPage County site, that's the search site, that SOA, and that allows you to look up your property, and it opens up very helpful tabs. One of them is a 5-year tab history that allows you to just see your assessments, exemptions, tax rates through the years. The assessor and treasurer, you can look up the property index number on the assessor's website. That's a Lake County to search when your township's open, and then Will County, McHenry County, Kane County, with Kendall County. You can just search for those assessor websites, and they have very useful information as well. That's my contact info on the top there. So that's my phone number. You can call, text, and then that's my email. You can email as well. I'm happy to answer questions for anyone. I don't charge for simple questions. I'm more than happy to explain stuff. I want to make sure everyone understands property taxes as best they can, and try to answer and help people out. So
I have another question
come
here.
at me.
This one said, is there a specific appeal package that you submit, and where could they get it from if so?
So there are appeals. There's forms. Each county has a different form that you submit depending on the level you're submitting. The DuPage County Board of Review has a 2-page form that you submit out. Will County has a 4-page form. Every county has different appeal packages. Cook County has their own set of forms for the assessor and a different set for the Board of Review. And with the appeal form, when I submit for my clients, depending, sometimes I'll just fill out the form with my comparables if they're straightforward and I don't need to offer an explanation. Other times I'll include a brief, a legal brief explaining why I believe, you know, what's going on, where they need to reduce the taxes. But again, each form is completely different, depends on the county and the level of appeal. But yeah, you can get those at most of those sites. It's your county assessor, search those up, or look for your county board of review, and you can find those forms. I will say this, for 2020, for the bills you're getting right now, this is an interesting time to think about appeals because almost everywhere in the state of Illinois is closed for appeals right now. There's 3 counties in Cook County where you can still appeal at the board of review. Otherwise, or there's 3 townships in Cook County where you can still appeal. Otherwise, there's no 2020 appeals that can be filed anymore. And that means the bills that people are going to get this year are already set. There are, now you can start looking for the 2021, but most counties don't open for appeals until typically June, sometimes early if they're being really ambitious that year, but most counties appeal cycle is June through December for one 30-day window somewhere in there. So yeah, you can find the forms. They don't typically publish the forms for that year until they're opening for appeals, or maybe a week or 2 beforehand. But yeah, some counties even in their forms offer detailed explanation. I know, I think Will County puts like a 20-page packet together, and 4 of those pages are the actual appeal form. The rest of it is kind of instructions, guides, explanations, stuff like that.
Okay.
I guess, yeah, the other thing with that, when you're putting together an appeal, we talked about the market is clearly a way you can appeal. You can use the market value of the house, comparable sales in the area. Just remember, if you're ever putting together your own appeal, the number that is relevant is the price per square foot. And we always use what the assessor has. So that's the purchase price per square foot. And you want to find comparable to yours. So if you have a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, you want to find other 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath. You could find a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, that's fine. But if you don't really want to be submitting a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath to yours, if you can avoid it, because then they have to start making as many adjustments. But when you're comparing stuff, the most relevant comparison is the purchase price per square foot or the building assessed value per square foot. If you're doing these appeals on your own, those are by far the most relevant pieces of information that the county will look at, and that's the number they're going to compare. So if you're ever putting stuff together, just keep that in mind. Is there any more? I think I just saw the chat pop up with
No, that was me. So,
gotcha. Okay.
so.
Any other questions out there for us? Take a look
Great
here.
job, Ryan.
Much
Excellent
appreciated.
job. Excellent.
And I will say this, if anyone does have questions, feel free to email them to me. I'll try my best to answer them. Maybe not this weekend, but next week I will, I'll sit down and I can usually write out an email to answer most questions, or you can feel free to call or text me. And I'm happy to answer them. I don't mind at all. I enjoy providing information to people. I will happily sign you up so you don't have to think about this, and I will happily appeal your taxes until you're done with that property. But I will also happily answer questions because I like to make sure everyone understands their property taxes, and try to keep it a little less confusing.
I have a question for you. So if someone did want to utilize your services to appeal their taxes, how does that work?
So the way it works is you call, text, or email me and say, hey, I have a property. I would like to appeal them. I would like you to appeal them on my behalf. And they'll give me the address. I'll draft the paperwork and I'll send it over. My agreement is a 1-page agreement. It can be signed digitally. It's very straightforward. And the way I work, I don't charge up front. I don't charge in the event that I cannot find a case for an appeal. So I'll review a property, see if there's a case for an appeal. If there isn't a case, I won't submit it. Like let's say they just bought it for higher than it's assessed and I don't want them to get an increase. There's no charge for that. I don't charge. If I submit an appeal and I lose, there's no charge for that. My fee is based on the estimated first year's tax savings. And that's when we get a decision that says, here was your original assessment. Your new assessment is now lower. We're going to estimate the tax savings. Let's say those are, you know, whatever, $1,000. My fee is based on a percentage of those, and it goes from typically for residential single family, 25 to 35%, depending on the county and the township and where they are in the assessment cycle. But more often than not, it's about 30% of the first year's savings. So if I say I'm going to save you about $1,000, I charge you about $300, and it's, you know, goes up from there. And that's, I don't charge up. There's no extra costs or fees. It's just a percentage of the first year's estimated savings.
Right. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I'd like to thank all of my panelists for assisting me with this today. And also just want to let you guys know that just for attending, I'm going to actually send out a tool that I use. It's called HomeBot, and it's a home valuation tool in the sense of letting you know the property values that are surrounding you in the surrounding area. It has a lot of great information in there for you. I'm going to get that sent out to you all, everyone that was on the presentation for today. And then once again, I'd like to thank Rich and Tony for sponsoring and being moderators, and Ryan for all of his professionalism, and all of my team members that are out there, Antonita and Bridget, Dwight, Holly, thank you guys as well. And that's all I have for you today.
Thank you all. And thank you all for the great questions too.
Thanks guys. Thanks for inviting us.
Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.